Let's talk a little bit about virtual machines, what they are, and then the two different types of virtual machines. Now let's start with the types. And now you have here in front of you a type 2 and a type 1 schematic. And type 2 is what you most commonly see if you're in a classroom or something like that and you're creating virtual machines. You've got your regular hardware. Here's your computer. You've got your Windows, say Windows 10 or a Windows 11 running on top of it, and then you install what we call a hypervisor. That hypervisor could be VirtualBox, VMware, some hypervisor, and then on that hypervisor you install different versions of Windows. That's a type 2 machine, but it's a little bit slow because you've got this Windows down here that I'm running everything through. That is to say, as I run these versions of Windows up here, here's a Windows 10, a Windows 11, a Windows Server, I'm actually running those through my Windows here before they can actually get to the hardware. Because you see, the hypervisor is providing to these guys hardware. It's providing what these want as hardware. For example, if I were to put a Mac operating system on this hypervisor, it would present to that to that operating system what Macs think is the hardware for Mac. And so in order to get to that hardware, this hypervisor has to actually reach down here through this Windows installation, and that slows things down. There is such a thing as a type 1, and this is the way we do it typically in industry. We just have hardware, there's our computer, and then on top of that computer we put a hypervisor. This is a bare bones hypervisor. That is to say, there is no operating system on this hardware. This is the operating system. But its only purpose is to run other operating systems on top of it. So here's my Windows 10, my Windows 11, my Windows Server. Now, when we look at these on my computer in just a moment, we're actually looking at type 2 hypervisors for VirtualBox and VMware. But for Hyper-V, which is built into Windows and available to you, that's a type 1 hypervisor. Now you say, wait a minute, how is that a type 1 hypervisor when I'm running Windows when I install it? Well, it appears to be a type 2 hypervisor, but actually what it does is actually slips underneath your Windows operating system. It actually slips a thin layer between hardware and your Windows, in my case Windows 11 operating system, so that the hypervisor is really a type 1 hypervisor in that case, even though it appears to be type 2. Now let's take a look at these things, and I've got all three of these. At one time we couldn't run them together, but today we can. Down, you can't see it here, but let me move my window down here for a moment. Okay, now you're looking at my taskbar, and you'll see right over here this little, looks like a kind of a azure or a light blue computer. This is Hyper-V. This is built into Windows. I have to turn it on in the features, so I have to go to show features. Actually, let's go ahead and do that. Features, turn Windows features on and off, and I know you couldn't see that, but right here you see this Hyper-V. That's normally off. Let me put this down a little bit. This is normally turned off, and so I have to go into this turn Windows features off and on and turn that on in order for Hyper-V to be available. So this one is Hyper-V over here. This next one you're looking at after the Chrome browser, this little box, this little cube, that's Oracle VMware or VM VirtualBox. So this is a free hypervisor. It's a type 2 hypervisor. Now remember, Hyper-V is type 1. This is a type 2. And then if we go two more over, you see this little three-headed arrow. This is a kind of yellow three-headed arrow. That's VMware Workstation Player. Now, Player is a free hypervisor. There is a VMware Workstation that is a pro version that you have to pay for, and it does quite a bit more than the Player does. One thing I want you to notice here is the separation between the manager. Notice when I hover over this Hyper-V, it says Manager, This is just the manager. Over the VirtualBox, it doesn't say it, but that's also just a manager. Whereas they're both kind of together in this VMware Workstation. I'll show you what I mean by that. Let's start with the Hyper-V Manager. I'm going to go ahead and click that, and let me expand my window so that you can see it all. There we go. Now you can see my whole window, and you can see up here I have several, this is the manager, and I have several VMs here in this. So I'm going to take this Windows 10 22H264 Pro, and we're going to start that up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on this thing and say connect. I could just double click it to do this, but you notice that this opens up in a whole different window. The manager and this player window over here, they don't have to exist together. As a matter of fact, I could close my manager. Let's go ahead and do that just for fun. I'm going to close the manager altogether. I'm going to click start here. So this is now the player window, separate from the manager. Now you'll see that my Windows 10 is going to start up, and it's inside of a window here. So even though I'm on Windows 11 here, I can be running Windows 10 here in a window. So you're running a operating system inside of a window, and that's the way that these virtual machines work. This is going to take a minute to come up. By the way, these are always slower, again, partly because it's going through a lot of interpretation to get to it. I can choose what size I want here. I could go full screen, but I don't want to go full screen. Let's just take the 1366 by 768, and I'll say connect. And now we will go to our Windows 10 64 Pro inside of Windows. Let me log on to this. There we go. Now, one thing you need to know is that this Windows, this version, this operating system here uses some of your resources. So for example, this operating system is using some of my memory, it's using some of my processor cores, and those are not available to my computer, to my host operating system. This is the guest operating system. Those are not available to my host operating system while this is running. And so you have to be careful how much you actually give to this thing. If you give it too little, it runs very, very, very slowly. If you give it too much, it takes too much away from your computer, and everything else runs very, very slowly. So I have it kind of set halfway in between, and I know that the startup here is a little bit slow, but once it gets started up and I actually start using it and building some cache in it, I can move along at a pretty good clip, and that's because I have quite a bit of memory and cores dedicated to this thing. Now that's all done, by the way, in the manager, and I'll show you that in a moment. But here's my Windows 10, and you can see I can run this Windows 10 just like I would run any Windows 10, and it all works just perfectly fine. I'm going to shut this down for a moment, so I'm going to just click start over here, and it's still bringing stuff up, so it's still a little bit slow at this point. But let's click start and shut down. I'm going to shut this guy down, and while it's shutting down, let's go back to the manager. So I'm here in the manager, and you can see that it's running right now. It hasn't shut itself down yet. It's still working on it. But let's take one that's off. I'll take this home version, and I'm going to right click on that and click settings, and here are a number of various settings. Now these settings have to do with, for example, security. I can turn on or off the Trusted Platform Module, the TPM, which in Windows 11 you have to have on, or Windows 11 won't load. Here's where I can give it the amount of memory I want it to have, the amount of RAM, which takes it away from my host machine. Here's where I can give it the number of processors I want it to have. Now I've given this 16 processors. That leaves me 16 more processors to run everything else. If you're on a computer that only has 2 or 4 processors, you can only give it maybe half of those, and it'll run a little bit slower, but you'll be able to get through it. Here's where I can add hard drives and DVD drives as I wish. So I can add these virtual drives onto this machine. And finally, we have the network adapter. Now, Hyper-V works a little differently from the others. Hyper-V, you have to create switches first. And I would do that in a special area where I can set up networking. I'm not going to show you that right now because it's not that important at this moment. But I have to set up switches. And once I set those switches up, now I can tie into the switch that I want. In this case, it's just a default switch. What this does is it allows me to, if I create several, let's say all of these, all right, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I've got 6 computers. I can set them all on their own internal network inside my Hyper-V, and then they can all talk to each other like a just like any network. I can also tie it in depending on the type of switch that I choose to make it look like it's just another computer on my my real live network. So in other words, my host computer is one computer on it, and this becomes another computer on it, so that they look like two separate computers on the same physical network. So we have different ways to set these up. I can also set it up privately, by the way, so that it doesn't do any networking at all. So all of these are going to have some form of network adapter setup, and I'm not going to go into great detail on how that works, but just be aware that that each of them has its own way of doing it. I'm going to cancel this. All these are off. I'm going to turn off that manager, and let's go over to VirtualBox. Let's turn this window off as well, and let's go over to this VirtualBox. This is VirtualBox. I only have one machine on it. I got a Windows 10 22H2 Pro. Is that 22H2 or 22H1? I might have mislabeled that, but anyway, again, I'm in the manager, and you can see the word manager right here. And if I start up this machine, I've clicked on that machine and I start it, then what I'm doing is I'm starting it in a separate window, again separately from the manager. And here comes that window. You can see it coming up over here. I don't need this manager on anymore. I can turn that off, and this computer is going to boot up. Let's turn this little notice off as well. And so there's my Windows 10 booting up. Now, one thing I didn't show you in Hyper-V, let's go back to the manager here. If I want to, I can take a snapshot. And you can see I took a snapshot when I first created this machine, and I called it New Machine. If I make some changes to this machine, I can take another snapshot. Let's say I'm just about to do a lab. So let's say I'm just about to do lab 2. I can click take there, and I can type before lab 2, and I can take a snapshot, and now I'm in that state right here before lab 2. Now if I do something wrong during my lab and I mess things up, I can go to this and I can restore back to this point. And once I restore back, now it doesn't show restore here as available because I haven't made any changes, but if I had made changes, I could restore back to that point. And that way it would go right back to the way it was before lab 2, and then I could start over again without having to remake my whole machine over again because I can't figure out what I did wrong. So in all of these I can do snapshots with one exception, and that one exception is in the VMware. The free version of VMware Player, you cannot take snapshots. So this is the VMware Player over here. I'm going to click this little yellow three-headed arrow over here, and this is VMware Player. This is the free non-commercial version only, and you can see I have no way to take snapshots on these. Even if I right click it, there's no place to take snapshots. I do have other settings, so I can go in, for example, and change the network adapter on this one so that I can have a network within my VMware Player. I can also set my memory, my processors. In this case, I only have it set for 8 processors instead of 16. And by the way, I will tell you that I have found that even though I have less available to me in VMware, this seems to be, I think, the fastest of the 3 in actually running. So if I want to run this, I can just click play virtual machine, and I'm not going to go through what this is all about because this tells me a way that I might be able to speed it up, but I'm not going to deal with that right now. It's a little beyond our point right here. And I can start up my machine and I can run my Windows 10 in VMware Player. So those are the 3, and again, remember, VMware Player and VMware Player and VirtualBox are type 2, whereas Hyper-V is type 1. However, there are some things in the type 1 Hyper-V that you can't do as easily as you can in the other 2. For example, cloning a duplicate machine is not as easy in Hyper-V as it is in either VirtualBox or VMware Player. Personally, if I don't want to run Hyper-V, I run almost everything in Hyper-V, but if I'm experimenting and I want to be able to quickly clone machines and duplicate machines, then I usually do it in VirtualBox. So that's my preference for that. So there we go. Let's cut it off at this point, and we'll see you in the next video.